Hello and welcome. I'm Danita Jones. My family calls me Civic Minded Jones, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Sharon Kyle. She is a former president of the Guild Law School and is the publisher and co-founder of LA Progressive. For years before immersing herself into law and social justice, Ms. Kyle was a member of several space flight teams at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where she managed resources for people like Magellan, Genesis, and Mars Pathfinder. Sharon also sits on several boards, including the board of directors of the ACLU, and is on the editorial board of the blackcommentator.com. So let's welcome Sharon Kyle.
Thank you so much, Danita, for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Great. I'm so happy that you are here. And oh man, at one point, I would love to have a separate conversation about NASA.
Sure, I'd love to anytime.
Because I was like, oh my goodness, when I read that, I was like, yeah, I would love to dive into that. But for now, let's talk about why is this work important to you, the work that you do as far as, social justice, LA Progressive, ACLU. This has been
Yes,
a
yes.
thing, or seems like lifelong.
Right. So, as a Black woman in America, an African American, um, I think that it is essential that we understand the need for working on social justice issues because this country really moves forward in terms of its democracy. It expands because of the work that African Americans do. And it has historically been the case that when we work on issues, the rest of the country benefits, but we benefit too. And because I am a mom, a grandmom, I have lots of family members, nieces and nephews, and really, I mean, there's a sort of a selfish aspect of this. I want my family and I want my granddaughter to live in a country that represents what it says it represents. I want this to be a fully participatory democracy, and it has never been. So that's why I do what I do.
Great, great. So, what do you see as the unique role of progressive media like LA Progressive in helping bridge political and cultural divides in America today?
Well, when let's talk about who is the we. My husband, Dick Price, and I are the founders and the publisher and editor of the LA Progressive, which is a daily digital political magazine. So every day we publish typically 7 to 10 articles, and we have a newsletter where the articles are delivered to a mailing list. And we also have a website, and we're all over social media. Just type in LA Progressive, anybody that's watching this, LA Progressive, and you'll find us on all of the social media platforms. And you'll also find the website. And the unique role of progressive media, I'm just going to talk about progressive media in general. A few years ago, I joined the board of the Media Consortium. And the Media Consortium was a grouping of 75 independent media outlets like Mother Jones, or outlets like The Young Turks, or Truth Dig, Truth Out. So 75 different both digital media as well as print media, but all of these independent media outlets were independent. And the role that progressive media plays, and for the most part, these were all progressive outlets, the role that it plays is our role is to help to shape the range of political policies and possibilities that are viewed as acceptable to the dominant culture. So, for example, there's this term called the Overton window. Mm-hmm. The Overton window is a term that describes what media can do to change and shift what the dominant, normalized community believes is radical or not radical. So 150 years ago, it was not radical for Black people to be lynched on a regular basis.
Right.
There was nothing unusual that was happening back then. And it
It's
was
happening
so
too.
normal, in fact, that mainstream media didn't even cover it. So Ida B. Wells, a Black woman who was enslaved at birth, she was born in 1862. She took it upon herself to begin to document what was happening in Black America, particularly as it related to lynching. So the unique role of progressive media, and Ida B. Wells, I use her as an example of a progressive journalist. Because of the work that she did, she brought to the fore what was going on in the Black community so that the rest of the country would be made aware. And that changed America for the better. So the role of progressive media is to both bridge divides, racial divides, ethnic divides, gender divides, provide an insight into the worlds, because we in the United States live in, for the most part, a segregated existence. But the media serves as an opportunity to provide a window to different worlds that we wouldn't normally have access to.
That's great. That is so awesome and needed. So in an age of increasing media bias and misinformation, how does LA Progressive approach the responsibility of fact-based reporting while still advocating for justice and equality?
Well, when we started the LA Progressive, again, my husband, Dick Price, and I started the LA Progressive. It came about because we were both volunteering with a Democratic club in the Los Angeles area where we live. And that Democratic club did not have a newsletter. And so we volunteered to be the newsletter editors. And during the Barack Obama-Hillary Clinton primary, there were lots of people who wanted articles about Hillary Clinton, but not as many people wanted articles about Barack Obama. So my husband and I began to write lots of articles about Barack Obama. And it didn't take long before we realized that we were doing all the work. We were doing the writing, we were publishing the newsletter, we were getting it printed. It initially started off as just a small paper newsletter, small printed. So we were even taking on the cost of doing this. And so eventually I changed the name of it. Instead of the Dem Club, which was the name of the newsletter, I changed it to the LA Progressive. So we started the LA Progressive as a small print publication. For our intention was very small, just our local community. That was all that we could really afford. And I think we did it that way for about a year. And during that primary, it was made clear to me that we needed to have a publication where we had more control, because the people that we were working with really did not want a lot of articles about Barack Obama. So then we started the LA Progressive. But we were really lucky, and it's sort of sad to say this, but we were lucky because at the same time that this was going on, print media, the traditional, the LA Times that's delivered at your door, Washington Post, all of these magazines and newspaper outlets were laying off people in droves. And so there were a lot of journalists who didn't have a place to share their work, to share their experience. And for some writers, writing is something that they're compelled to do. They will do it for free. And so the LA Progressive, we started our website, and we happened to know some people in the media area who had lost jobs, and they asked if they could contribute, and they did, and they still do. They provide the articles, and these are professional journalists. So it gave us an opportunity. We trusted them, and we did feel that we had a responsibility of doing fact-based reporting and opinion pieces that were deeply connected to reality. So we had these wonderful journalists that had worked with the LA Times for many years. And then the second source of writing came from academics. Where we live in Los Angeles, we have close relationships with people who teach at UCLA, at USC, and then colleges and universities now across the country contribute to the professors contribute to the LA Progressive. And most of these professors are either historians or social scientists, and they make just a contribution that there's just no way that we could replace what they have done. We have published over 45,000 articles since we went online more than 17 years ago. So we've been LA Progressive for 18 years, but 17 years online. And I was really surprised that we had 45,000 articles, but I learned that because we recently shifted to a different hosting company. And I was surprised to find out how large our file was.
So you've been involved with the ACLU of Southern California. How has that work influenced your approach to journalism, activism, and civic engagement?
Yeah. So I've been involved with the ACLU, not just of Southern California, but National ACLU and the ACLU of Southern California and the ACLU of my local. We live in Northeast Los Angeles, which is adjacent to Pasadena. So I'm involved at all levels of the ACLU. I've served on the executive board of the National ACLU, the executive board of the ACLU of Southern California, and the executive board of the ACLU Pasadena Foothills chapter. And I consider my involvement with the ACLU to be one of the most educational experiences that I've had in the 18 years since we've been doing the LA Progressive. I've been active in the ACLU for maybe 12 years, but when we think about engaging in civic activities, one of the reasons I wanted to join the ACLU is because they promote and protect both civil liberties and civil rights. And at the time that I joined, honestly, I didn't know the difference between civil liberties and civil rights. I learned through my work with the ACLU that civil liberties are captured in the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, and that civil rights became the lingo of this country when we adopted the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. But my work with the ACLU really expanded my horizons, deepened my understanding of our rights of free speech, our rights to not have unreasonable searches and seizures. A lot of the things that I grew up in the projects in the Bronx, that's where I was born in Bronx, New York. And so much of what we experience as just citizens, I found out much of that can be challenged. Our right to vote, our right to attend public meetings, our right to community organizing. So many of the activities that are associated with civic engagement, we're somewhat not encouraged to do. And that lack of encouragement, I think, begins at the lower levels of education, middle school even. I think these are things that should be taught in public school, that in order to have a civically engaged populace, you have to have that in order to have democracy. I believe it is impossible to have democracy without a population that is both informed, educated, and civically engaged. And so the ACLU was one of the ways that I maintained civic engagement, that I made sure that what I was publishing was not in any way violating any laws like copyright infringement or, so I took my role with the ACLU, I took that role as an opportunity to educate myself, educate my community, and to also provide support to the ACLU as a volunteer. And I've done that for the past 12 years, and I'm still doing it.
That's great information, and to know that you can get educated by being involved with the ACLU.
That's right. Yeah. So many people think of the ACLU as just a litigation organization, but it lobbies. So you can lobby, and I was taught how to lobby my own congressional representative, how to lobby my own state representatives by working at the ACLU. So it litigates, it lobbies, and it educates the community about all of the issues that are pressing us. Like right now, the ACLU is heavily involved. It's probably the premier organization that has won more Supreme Court cases than any other nonprofit.
That's great. And again, I really didn't know all that information about the ACLU. Now it makes me actually want to get involved and get educated by them and work with them.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
It's very inexpensive. I don't remember what the annual membership is, but I'm pretty sure it's like $100 or less. I shouldn't say. Just go to aclu.org.
Yeah.
And you can find out how to join. It's an annual, very low, reasonable membership fee, and it really kind of keeps you abreast of what's happening in this country. In many ways, I think that the ACLU does a lot of what Congress should be doing. But definitely I encourage everybody to go to aclu.org.
Yeah, that's such a great resource. During the series, I've been talking about the lack of civic education and what happened with civics in schools and so forth. And I have a gentleman on here talking about that as well. But this is really good to know that organizations like the ACLU are there and can educate. So, so you've worked alongside many activists and movements. What strategies have you seen be most effective in turning grassroots activism into lasting political change?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. When I think about that, I wanted to talk about two women that approach this from two different standpoints. They have different strategies, but both of these women have my tremendous admiration and respect. The first is Angela Davis, and everybody knows, I mean, her name is a household name. She's a feminist, a brilliant activist, an academic, a public intellectual. And she says that Americans must continue to fight for human rights because victories of the past are not permanent. Mm-hmm. And that's what I have witnessed. I am several decades old. And the older I get, the more I see we seem to have victories and then find out that this thing is coming around again. Mm-hmm. And I think we're experiencing that right now. At this time in 2025, under the Trump administration, things that we thought that we had accomplished, DEI or what's happening with immigration, we thought that we had gotten past this. Right. But these victories are never etched in stone. And that's a quote from Angela Davis. And what she encourages people to understand is that social justice is a forever fight. Mm-hmm. And so while I would love to be able to do some work, accomplish what we want to accomplish and say, that's done. Yep. That's not realistic.
Box checked.
Right. It's really not realistic. And I had to come to terms with that because it can feel frustrating. It can leave you with a sense of hopelessness when you understand that this is a life work. Mm-hmm. But then, and so that's the realistic perspective, but there is reason for hope. And I wanted to talk about another woman whose name is not a household name, and her name is Jane McAlevey. Now, Jane McAlevey is a union organizer, an author, a political commentator. She was a senior policy fellow at the University of California, Berkeley's Institute for Research on Labor. And I speak about her in the past tense because she passed away, sadly. She left us too soon. I think she was 60 years old and she had cancer. And so she died in July of 2024.
Okay. Oh, recent.
But Jane McAlevey, what an amazing organizer. What she poured herself into was organizing labor. Mm-hmm. And Angela Davis also has focused on the role of labor and organizing labor in order to bring this country to be more democratic and inclusive. Mm-hmm. And Angela Davis believes, Jane McAlevey believes, and I believe as well, that until we have labor standing as strong as management and corporations, we're never really going to be able to experience democracy. Yeah. So some of the victories that Jane McAlevey had, which gives me hope for the future, is she achieved employer-paid family health care for the state and through SEIU in the state of Nevada. She prevented the rollback of public pensions. Now, you're a little younger, you appear to be a lot younger than I am. But when I was a child, public pensions were common. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. My dad retired on a public pension. He worked for the city of New York, and it was really normal to be able to retire at a reasonable age. I think he retired at 50.
Oh, really?
And he was able to collect this public pension, a reasonable, he had a nice life. From age 50, he died, he was 88 years old, and his pension was fine.
Yeah.
We've come to the place in this country where it's normal to not have a pension. Mm-hmm. Not just public pensions, but private pensions.
Private ones too.
And we've been convinced that it's not possible to have these things. Well, other countries have them. Other countries have universal health care. And so Jane McAlevey has fought some major fights and had victories. But like what Angela Davis says, what we have to understand is victories are not permanent. So you got to stay in the fight. But there is hope because Jane McAlevey and many, many others have demonstrated that you can win the fights, but people have got to get involved, get civically engaged.
Right. And, and it's so important. You have to stay in the fight, and people get complacent. Things seem to be okay. Everyone was like, oh, we had a Black president. Everything is all good now. But it wasn't. And I talk about this with another expert about how after he was elected, or actually before he was elected, when he was running for president, how all the white supremacy groups start rearing this ugly head and so forth. And it was very reminiscent to what happened in the 1800s when the Black politicians, except for it wasn't we haven't had the violence of the 1800s, but as far as the rage and the outbursts and so forth, is very compatible to that. So how can we inspire greater civic engagement and voter participation, especially among those who feel disillusioned or disconnected from politics?
Yeah, that's sort of one of my greatest frustrations. When we started the LA Progressive initially, I thought that my family, and I'm just going to be frank, my family doesn't read the LA Progressive for the most part. And I'm the oldest of all of my cousins. So they range in age I'm in my late 60s, and my youngest cousin is 30 years younger than I am. And they kind of live day-to-day existence, just eking by, trying to make a living. They don't necessarily see the connection between public policy and the lives that they live. Mm-hmm. Sadly, I think that the crisis that's impending right now will help them to see how important it is that elections have consequences. What I'm trying to impart to them is that we truly, really have the power to make change. Mm-hmm. But we've got to stay engaged. I mean, we all saw when George Floyd was murdered, mm-hmm. the entire world came out in protest, marching, standing in solidarity with African Americans. Mm-hmm. I was so delighted to see that, mm-hmm. but I also understood that was not sustainable. Right. You have to have an organized structure, an infrastructure that is prepared to provide the kinds of supports that people who haven't been civically engaged can do, but that only happens with organizing. So mobilizing is great, but organizing requires much more work. And so that's the way that we can inspire greater civic engagement. We have got to organize to get people who are not engaged, to get them to be more engaged. And usually what happens is there's some kind of crisis. And I think we're just, right there right now. As you and I are speaking, Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, just beat he spoke, I think, for 24 hours straight. Strom Thurmond, who was from the South, and he had the longest speech on the Senate floor. He was the number one person, and now Cory Booker just beat him. And Cory Booker did that because we are in a national crisis. And this national crisis provides us with an opportunity, a launching off point to get people to get up and see that their livelihoods are threatened. We're hearing that Social Security may be cut, or we're hearing about USAID, which is an organization that provides many things, but one thing that it provides is medical care in Africa for people with AIDS. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think, or if anyone listening to this thinks that what's happening in Africa doesn't affect us, well, when AIDS first became a thing back in the mid 1980s, it was first diagnosed or first seen in Haiti, and with some flight attendants that were flying to Canada. And it was just a few people. Mm-hmm. This thing became a pandemic, right. And it didn't even start in the United States. So USAID provides a stopgap to protect those of us here in the United States, as well as the rest of the world, particularly when it comes to dangerous communicable diseases. Mm-hmm.
And people really,
I just hope that it doesn't spiral out of control. Exactly. That's all I'll say on that. and civic engagement is essential for life.
Exactly. And when people, say we just all should be about America, but these worldwide issues, it affects America too.
And absolutely.
Yeah. And I hope people will start to really understand that and get that. It's not just about us, So social media often fuels division. In your view, how can progressive media leverage digital platforms to promote unity rather than polarization?
Right. So social media, I mean, it's a two-sided sword. It, in many cases, has been the tool for the LA Progressive, for example. We, in any given month, will have 300,000 people read articles in the LA Progressive. There is no way that would have been possible if it weren't for social media and the technology that we have available to us today. But those things are a tool. They're not necessarily good or bad. It just depends on how it's used. Mm-hmm. So we use it to bring people together. There are those who use it to divide. They use divisive tactics. They oftentimes use misinformation or outright lies. Their goal is to keep us divided instead of being united. And of course, we want to be united because in unity comes strength.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what can we do to use or to leverage the technology that's available to us to promote more unity? Well, what my husband and I do is we're out in the community. We write about what's going on in the progressive community, and we also pay attention to what's going on outside of the progressive community. Mm-hmm. We actually have a community of readers, LA Progressive Community of Readers. Like I said, 300,000 articles are read per month, and we have regular people returning every day. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that helps to combat division and to increase unity is through relationships, building relationships, joining organizations, going to events, because you really can't just have a revolution. And by revolution, I mean major change. Mm-hmm. You really can't have major change simply by being in the digital world. The digital world is a tool, and it's an essential tool, but it is not the only thing. We actually have to connect with each other.
Exactly. Get on those streets and meet people and organize and
that's right.
Get together. Uh, what are some concrete steps everyday citizens can take to escape echo chambers and become more media literate? Media literate.
Right. So, um, when we first started publishing the LA Progressive, I would say that there's a lot about the media, about our social issues that I was really unaware of. So, in order for a person to become more media literate, believe it or not, you just got to read the media. And I mean, common sense will kind of give you a sense of what is accurate and what is inaccurate. My husband, he can't stand listening to Fox News. I listen to Fox News. I do it about once a month, but I want to get a sense of what's going on in that area.
Right.
And it helps me. So you really need to have a broad sense of what is being reported in different areas of the country, what is being reported on different political the different political spectrums. And after a while, you'll get a sense of, well, what's true and what's not true, especially if you couple that with being engaged with an organization, working, organizing, volunteering. Those things work together to increase your knowledge, the depth of your knowledge, and to increase your belief in your ability to make change. But the only way to do it is to just get in there and start reading.
Right. Yeah. And finding a few sources for whatever particular thing that you are, reading about or watching on the news. And if something doesn't feel or sit right or ring true for you, like look even deeper just to have more reliable sources.
That's right. And and if you find out that something is not right, you can write to the editor. That's happened with the LA Progressive. I remember once I wrote an article, and I think I misquoted someone, and immediately they checked it out and they contacted me and said that was wrong. Then I changed it, I corrected it, and then republished it with the correction. Another article that we wrote was about the Statue of Liberty. Many years ago, I learned that the Statue of Liberty had chains on its feet. Mm-hmm. And I was born and raised in New York, and I'd never heard of the Statue of Liberty having chains around its ankles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I started to do some research and found out that and found some actual photographs of these chains that are around the Statue of Liberty's feet. And then I learned that the Statue of Liberty was actually a gift from France, which I already knew that, but it was a gift to honor the United States 1865 decision to get rid of slavery. Right. Mm-hmm. So it was the Emancipation Proclamation led to France giving the Statue of Liberty to the United States. And the reason that it was so important is because they had a strong abolition movement in France, and the abolitioners really promoted the Statue of Liberty and the importance of these chains. And the chains are sort of lying at the base of the Statue of Liberty. You cannot see those chains unless a photograph is taken from either a helicopter, but from above. Mm-hmm. Because the Statue of Liberty stands on a base that's about a story high. Mm-hmm. So it's a sort of a building that it stands on, and it's impossible to see it from the ground. Right. But when I wrote the article about the research that I had done, mm-hmm. I got a lot of blowback. Mm-hmm. And people said they went to the National Parks website, and that the story that I told was different than the national parks. Mm-hmm. Well, it took about 5 years, and then the national parks changed their story. And so now their story is the same as mine.
Right. They acknowledge it now. I know
they acknowledge it. Yeah.
Because there's another, someone else, this is a story that's been going around on social media. talking about the exact same thing and showing the photos of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's interesting that it took them that long to actually acknowledge it.
They actually denied it.
Hmm.
They denied it during the it was I think they denied it, not it wasn't the it was during the first no the second Bush, George W. Bush.
Hmm.
They denied it during that era. And
Hmm.
then when Barack Obama came in, it took about 2 years. And then under the Barack Obama administration, they changed the website to include the true story of the origins of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah. Wow. How can progressive media play a role in centering racial justice within political conversations without alienating broader audiences?
You know, that's one of the biggest challenges for the LA Progressive. When I got very interested in politics, I noticed, and I wrote about this quite a bit, that in the progressive world, that there was as much separation of the races as it was on the right side. So whether you're left or right, I saw a lot of segregation. And I wrote about this, and I started to think of how to at least provide news media, both news that was reported and opinion pieces
Mhm.
that were providing information spoken from the Black perspective. And so I started doing that with the LA Progressive. So the LA Progressive has a lot of content, but I'm very intentional that every single day we have something that is published, both from a feminine, a woman's perspective, and from the Black perspective. We also try to provide a platform with intention for LGBTQ concerns, as well as immigration. So basically, people who have been marginalized. Our focus is to provide a platform where their message is shared with the entire progressive community, which also means the white progressive community, who, if you go to other progressive outlets, you don't see as much of an intentional incorporation of marginalized voices.
Okay. What are some of the, but by you saying that, it made me think of what are some of the misconceptions about progressive? Or
Well, you know, around in the early 1900s, so one of the misconceptions that I think may be held by Black people is that being a progressive is a white thing.
mm,
And that misconception came about for legitimate reasons. Because in the early 1900s, when the progressive movement first began, there were efforts to keep Black people out of labor unions. Basically, Black people just couldn't find a way to participate in this democracy, whether they were progressive or whatever. You couldn't even vote. And
mm,
so the whole progressive movement was interpreted to be racist. So I think that that's probably one of the enduring misperceptions. Here in Los Angeles, Tavis Smiley has a station, a media station, media outlets, KBLA, and he calls his outlet the unapologetically progressive, but
mhm.
it caters to a Black community. And I'm hoping that what Tavis is doing is going to shift the way that Black people look at progressivism. Because progressivism really is about establishing a democracy that provides opportunities for the people that are currently marginalized. And those kinds of opportunities are opportunities in education, healthcare, housing. Oh my gosh, it just goes on and on. The ways that this country has not really cared for the people. You either have to have deep pockets
Right.
or be somehow proximate to corporations in order to live a successful life. and progressives believe, and I'm one of them, that that is not necessary. All of us should have a shot.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way. Despite today's divisions, what gives you hope? Are there recent stories or trends you've covered that point to a more unified future?
Well, so what gives me hope really is the new generations. Every generation that comes, every 4 years, I think we get about 4 million new voters. Mm. And when you're young, you can be hopeful and you think you can take on the world, and that's a good way to be. Mm-hmm. We need that kind of energy. Mm-hmm. That's where we've seen change. Most of our social change comes from the young people. It's incumbent upon people like me to provide the information that young people need in order for them to make more informed choices. There's this book that it's free and you can go online to find it. It's called Twitter and Tear Gas: The Power and Fragility of Networked Protest. And it's written by a woman, and I know I'm going to screw up her name. It's Zeynep Zufki. She's a social scientist, and she's working on understanding the role of the digital media and how it can really impact social change. And so she did some research in the areas of major social movements like Occupy Wall Street, the Zapatistas, the Arab Spring. And what she found was that the digital technology that's available to us today can make a huge difference in mobilizing. It's sort of like something catches fire and it just goes global. So we didn't have this, just as recently as 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we do have ways to get people together, to mobilize them, but mobilizing is not organizing. Mm-hmm. Organizing includes mobilizing, but organizing also requires a commitment to the long term and understanding that there are no permanent wins, that keeping a society that treats all people fairly and right, maintaining that requires an ongoing effort. And if we continue to work to provide progressive media and ways for young people just getting active, ways for them to understand how to vote, to understand how to support different organizations. If we continue to do that, that gives me hope, because that is what we need in order to have a democracy.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So what advice would you give to young journalists and civic leaders who want to make a real impact in today's complex media and political landscape?
The advice that I would give is to just get out there and do it. So let me tell you a story. When Dick and I started the LA Progressive, like I was saying, we actually thought that we were just providing information really to our congressional district. Each congressional district has about, I think, 750,000 people, 1 million people. And that's what, and we certainly weren't reaching all of them with our little paper newsletter. But we thought maybe one day we could reach, just the entire congressional district. Well, after we went online, within a week, we had people finding us in New York and people reading, and it was shocking to me. So we jumped in and people started reading. We went to a meeting, a town hall with a California Assembly representative who is no longer an Assembly representative. And he was giving us some information about judicial seats, judicial races in Southern California. Well, in California, the state of California, judges are elected or appointed by the governor. But the electing a judge is really, it's challenging because most voters don't know anything about these judges. I was raising my hand to ask the Assembly representative how we could find out more about the judges. And I raised my hand and I went to introduce myself. And he says, "I know who you are." And at this time, we had the LA Progressive up and running, I don't know, maybe 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Sharon, I've been reading the LA Progressive. I was so surprised.
Mm-hmm.
So what I learned is that it really just requires that you make a commitment to do this work. And if you just do it regularly, now I'm older, I'm retired, there's no way that I could work the way that I do now when I was raising children.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, decide for yourself how much room in your life do you have to make this country the kind of country you want to raise your kids in, or the kind of country that you want to live in. But I am so committed to accountability. I'm committed to change and reform, and so my recommendation is just get in and start doing it. I started out by buying books. There's Democracy for Dummies, um, how to design a website for dummies. Those idiot guides and those books helped me out a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. So, any final thoughts?
Well, these are really troubling times. But I am encouraged that oftentimes it's crisis that becomes the kindling that sets the kindling on fire and gets people up, out into the streets, but not just into the streets, because it's not like we want to just march. That's a part of it, but that's not all of it. We want to see change and social change and change in policy. And we can do that, but we've just got to stay committed. So people like you, young people like you, and what you're doing, you just decided to interview people. That's
Right.
fantastic. And now we have to promote each other to
Right.
get the word out.
Absolutely.
So my closing thought is, if you're interested in learning more about politics, not just in Los Angeles, we provide information about national and global. Go to laprogressive.com, published by Sharon Kyle and Dick Price. And I thank you so much for inviting me and having this conversation with me today.
Of course. And thank you for being here. And you actually, I was about to say, how could we support your work? And you got it right there. It's been wonderful. I'm so happy that we had a chance to talk, and hopefully we can do this again. I'd love to keep this conversation going.
Same here, Danita, and good luck. I hope this works out very well.
Thank you. Thank you.